My name is Elise, and I'm 29 years old. If you had asked me just a year ago what mattered most in my life, I would have answered without hesitation. Family. Not my career, not the money I earned, not even the little dreams I kept tucked away in journals. I would have said my family. Because no matter how messy life became, no matter how lonely the world felt, I always believed that family was my anchor. But anchors can rust. And sometimes, the very people you expect to hold you steady are the ones who pull you under. My grandmother, Margaret, was the heart of our family. She wasn't just my grandmother, she was my second mother. When my parents were too busy with their own lives, when my siblings brushed me off, it was Grandma who scooped me into her arms, baked me cookies, and told me I mattered. She was the one who encouraged me to go to college, the one who slipped me gas money when I was struggling, the one who listened when no one else seemed to care. So when she passed away, my world cracked. I had prepared myself for the grief, I thought. But grief has a way of slipping past your defenses, of catching you in the small, quiet moments when you least expect it. A certain song on the radio, a recipe card in her handwriting, the empty chair at the head of the table. I was ready for that kind of pain. What I wasn't ready for was betrayal. At first, everything seemed normal after the funeral. My parents, my older brother Daniel, and my younger sister Harper all acted the way I expected: somber, quiet, grieving in their own ways. We gathered in my parents' house, sorting through old photos, sharing stories about Grandma. My mother cried into tissues, my father poured whiskey, my siblings and I tried to comfort each other. But then, small things started to feel off. One evening, I noticed my father slip into his office after dinner, shutting the door quickly behind him. That wasn't unusual by itself. Dad was always protective of his office. But this time, he carried a thick envelope in his hands, and when I asked about it, he gave me a look so sharp I immediately fell silent. "Work stuff," he muttered, and that was the end of the conversation. Except, it didn't feel like work stuff. Later, I overheard Harper whispering with Daniel in the kitchen. When I entered, they both stopped talking, their faces stiff with guilt. Harper forced a smile and asked if I wanted tea, but the awkwardness hung in the air like a thick fog. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. We were all grieving. Everyone was raw, sensitive, secretive in their own ways. But the more time passed, the more obvious it became. There was something my family wasn't telling me, something important. I brushed it off for a while, convincing myself it didn't matter. But then my Aunt Grandma's sister pulled me aside one Sunday after church. She squeezed my hand tightly and whispered, "I hope you know your grandmother wanted the best for you. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her words lodged in my chest like a stone. "What do you mean?" I asked, but she just shook her head and walked away. That night, lying awake in bed, her words echoed through my mind. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I started to notice more signs. My mother's evasive answers whenever I asked about the will. Daniel locking drawers that used to stay open. Harper changing the subject whenever Grandma's estate came up. And then there was the silence. The kind of silence that speaks volumes. Whenever I entered the room, conversations stopped. Whenever I asked questions, people looked away. It was like my family had built a wall around me, brick by brick, sealing me out. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was being kept from me. And deep down, I knew what it was. Grandma had always promised me she would take care of me when she was gone. She never said exactly what that meant, but I believed her. A woman, but she owned her house outright, had savings, had little heirlooms she valued deeply. She once told me, "Elise, I want you to have the things that will help you build a life, not just the things that gather dust." So when she passed, I expected her will to reflect those promises. I didn't expect riches or lavish gifts, but I believed she would leave me something meaningful, something to show her love carried on. But as the days turned into weeks, no one mentioned the will. No one mentioned her estate at all. When I asked my father directly if Grandma had left instructions, he tightened his jaw and said, "Don't worry about it, everything's being handled." That answer didn't satisfy me. Handled how? By who? What did she say? He snapped then, slamming his glass down on the table. I said, "Don't worry about it, Elise." I recoiled, stunned by his sudden anger. The conversation ended there, but my suspicion only grew. I started watching more closely how Daniel always seemed to smirk when I asked questions. How Harper suddenly avoided being alone with me. How my mother's eyes darted whenever I brought up Grandma's name. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but something inside me told me to stay quiet, to observe, to wait. Because if they were hiding something, bursting in without proof would only make me look foolish. Still, the weight of it gnawed at me. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every time I saw my father's office door closed, I felt like there was a secret locked away just beyond it. And then, one night, I heard them. I was walking down the hall when I caught the sound of muffled voices behind the office door. My hand froze on the doorknob as I leaned closer. "She'll never know what's in the papers," Daniel's voice whispered. "We've got them locked away." My breath caught in my throat. "Exactly," my father replied. "As far as Elise knows, there's nothing to fight over. We'll divide it as we see fit." My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. And then Harper's laugh, low and cruel. "It's not like Elise would ever fight us. She's too naive." The words cut deeper than any blade. I backed away from the door, my whole body shaking. My own family, my parents, my siblings were conspiring to erase me from my grandmother's will. The betrayal was worse than anything Ethan had done, because Ethan was a lover who left me. But this was blood. That night, lying in bed with tears streaming down my face, I realized something terrifying. My family had hidden my inheritance papers. They had locked them away, convinced I would never find them. But what they didn't know, the thing that would ultimately unravel them, was that I had written those papers myself. I was about to discover that the very papers they hid were the ones I had written myself. The night I overheard my family whispering behind the office door was the night everything changed. Up until then, I'd told myself maybe I was paranoid. Maybe the grief was twisting my perspective. But once I heard my brother's voice saying, "She'll never know what's in the papers, we've got them locked away," there was no room left for doubt. Still, I didn't confront them. Not yet. I needed more than just a few stolen words to prove what I suspected. I needed to be certain. That's when I started noticing the silence. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the weight of conversations cut short. The shift in the air when I entered a room. The way my questions always seemed to hang unanswered. Silence became their strategy, and suddenly it was everywhere. I remember the first time it felt undeniable. It was a Sunday afternoon, a week after the funeral. My father sat at the dining room table reading the paper, my mother was tidying the kitchen, and I walked in holding one of Grandma's old recipe cards. It had her neat handwriting on it, the edges yellowed from years of use. "Mom," I said softly, "did Grandma leave any instructions about who should get her things? Like the recipes, or the china cabinet?" The room went still. My father's paper lowered slightly, his eyes narrowing just a fraction. My mother's hand froze mid-wipe on the counter. Then she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice too light. "Don't worry about all that. We'll sort it out together." I frowned. "But shouldn't there be something written down? A will?" I thought Grandma said. "Enough, Elise," my father snapped, slapping the paper flat on the table. "Your grandmother didn't have much. There's nothing to fuss about." The sharpness of his tone stunned me into silence. My mother busied herself with wiping an already clean counter, avoiding my gaze. The conversation ended there, like it always did whenever I tried to ask. That was the moment I realized silence wasn't an accident, it was a choice. Over the next few days, the pattern grew clearer. Harper would leave the room when I brought up Grandma. Daniel would change the subject, laughing too loudly, making jokes that fell flat. My parents would exchange quick glances, then brush me off with vague reassurances. And then came the night I found the drawers locked. I had gone into my father's office to look for a pen. Normally, the bottom drawer of his desk was stuffed with old stationery. But when I pulled the handle, it didn't budge. I tried the one above it locked, too. My stomach dropped. My father had never locked his drawers before. I stood there for a long time, staring at the metal handles, my pulse hammering in my ears. I knew, without knowing, that what I was looking for was behind those locks. The inheritance papers. The will. The truth they were hiding from me. That night, I lay in bed replaying every interaction in my head. The way my mother's voice wavered when she said, "Don't worry about it." The way Harper avoided my eyes. The smirk on Daniel's face when I asked too many questions. Each detail formed a bigger picture, a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. My family was conspiring to shut me out. The confirmation came in the most unexpected way, from my aunt, again. She called me one evening, her voice low, as if afraid someone might overhear. "Elise, I know you've been left out of the conversations, but Margaret, your grandmother loved you dearly. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." My heart thudded. "Aunt June, what are you trying to say? Do you know something about the will?" Silence on the other end. A silence that spoke volumes. Then she sighed heavily. "I can't get in the middle of this. But trust your instincts, child. If you feel something isn't right, it probably isn't." The line went dead before I could ask more. I sat there staring at my phone, her words replaying in my mind. If you feel something isn't right, it probably isn't. By then, the silence from my own family wasn't just suspicious, it was deafening. I began testing them, asking small, careful questions. At dinner, I casually asked, "So what happens to Grandma's house now?" My father grunted something about being handled. Harper quickly changed the subject to her new job. Daniel rolled his eyes and muttered, "Why do you care so much?" Another night, I mentioned how Grandma once told me she wanted me to have her necklace. My mother stiffened. "Oh, that necklace is somewhere safe," she said. Her voice brittle. She wouldn't look at me. Each answer was a dodge, a deflection, a refusal to acknowledge the truth. The more they tried to silence me, the more determined I became. I started watching them carefully. I noticed how Daniel always hovered near my father's office, as though guarding it. How Harper spent hours on the phone in hushed tones, retreating to her room and closing the door. How my mother flinched every time Grandma's name was mentioned. It all added up. They were hiding something big. And then, one evening, I caught them again. I had gone to the kitchen for water when I heard voices drifting from the living room. I froze, staying just out of sight. "She keeps asking questions," Harper hissed. "What if she finds out?" "She won't," my father replied firmly. "We've kept the papers locked away. As long as we stay quiet, she'll never know." Daniel's voice followed, smug and cruel. "Exactly. Elise is too soft. She'll just believe whatever we tell her." My blood boiled. I backed away before they could notice me, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped the glass of water. My heart pounded, rage and heartbreak swirling together until I thought I might explode. That was the night I knew for certain. I couldn't rely on their words, or their silence. I had to find the truth myself. The next morning, I resolved to start searching. Quietly. Carefully. If the inheritance papers were hidden, then I would uncover them. And when I did, I would have proof of their betrayal, proof of Grandma's love, proof that I wasn't naive or crazy. Because silence might be powerful, but the truth? The truth was stronger. Their words confirmed that my grandmother's will had been hidden from me. If silence had been my family's weapon, then words became my proof. I didn't set out to overhear them that night, it just happened. But sometimes fate has a way of placing you exactly where you need to be, even if it breaks your heart in the process. It was late, past midnight, and I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, and every creak of the walls made me restless. I padded down the hallway for a glass of water, trying not to wake anyone. That's when I noticed a faint glow under the door of my father's office. I froze. That room had been kept locked for weeks. My father never let anyone near it, not even my mother. Yet here it was, light spilling through the crack, voices drifting into the hall. I tiptoed closer, my bare feet silent against the carpet. My heart pounded, adrenaline rushing through me as I pressed my ear to the wood. What I heard made my stomach twist into knots. Daniel's voice, low and sharp. "We can't keep dodging her questions forever. She's not as clueless as you think." My chest tightened. He was talking about me. Then Harper's laugh, cold and dismissive. "Oh, please. Elise doesn't have the guts to push back. She's always been soft. She'll accept whatever story we give her." The words stung like a slap. Soft, clueless. That's what my own sister thought of me? My father's voice followed, steady and commanding. "She won't find out. The papers are locked away. And as long as none of us cracks, Elise will be left with nothing." Exactly as planned. I clapped my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping out loud. Nothing? Exactly as planned? My blood ran cold. I pressed closer to the door, my nails digging into the wood. They were talking about Grandma's will. I knew it in my bones. Daniel spoke again, his tone almost gleeful. "And once everything's divided between us, there'll be no trace. No one will ever know Elise was supposed to get the biggest share." My knees nearly buckled. The biggest share? My grandmother had left me the largest inheritance, and they had locked it away, erasing me from the picture entirely. Harper's voice was softer this time, but no less cruel. "It's what she gets for always being Grandma's favorite. She thought she was so special. Well, now she'll see." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I couldn't not now. I had to hear every word. Then my mother's voice, trembling but complicit. "What if someone asks questions? Elise isn't the only one who cared about Margaret. What if June starts digging?" My father's response was firm. "June won't do anything. She's too timid. And Elise? She has no idea what we've hidden. By the time she suspects, it'll be too late." I staggered back from the door, my whole body shaking. The walls seemed to tilt, the hallway spinning around me. My family, my blood, had just admitted to stealing my inheritance. Worse, they were mocking me, painting me as weak, naive, easy to deceive. I stumbled into my room and collapsed on the bed, covering my face with trembling hands. I wanted to scream, to confront them, to tear the office door open and throw their lies back at them. But I didn't. Because I knew if I burst in without proof, they'd deny everything. They'd twist it, make me doubt what I heard, gaslight me into silence. No. If they wanted me to be quiet, I would let them think I was. But inside, I was already planning. As I lay there, tears streaming down my cheeks, I remembered Grandma's voice. "Elise, you're stronger than you think. You just don't know it yet." She had trusted me, confided in me, loved me unconditionally. And now I understood why she had left me so much, because she believed I could carry it, that I would honor her memory. But my family was determined to bury her wishes. The next morning, the atmosphere at breakfast was the same as always. Daniel cracked jokes. Harper scrolled through her phone. My parents sipped coffee. But I noticed the way their eyes flickered toward me, gauging my reactions, testing to see if I suspected anything. I kept my face neutral, spooning cereal into my bowl as though nothing was wrong. But inside, fury burned like wildfire. Daniel smirked at me across the table. "You look tired, Elise. Rough night?" I forced a smile. "Just couldn't sleep." If only he knew why. Harper chimed in, her tone falsely sweet. "You should really take care of yourself. Stress isn't a good look on you." I bit the inside of my cheek to stop myself from snapping. They thought they were clever. They thought I was oblivious. But I wasn't. I knew their game now, and I was determined to win. Over the next few days, I watched them closely. I saw the way Daniel guarded the office door. The way Harper avoided my gaze whenever I mentioned Grandma. The way my father stiffened when I asked about legal matters. Every detail was another piece of the puzzle, confirming what I had heard. But the most painful part wasn't the money, or even the betrayal of trust. It was the way they had reduced me to nothing in their minds. My sister's words echoed endlessly in my head. She's always been soft. She'll accept whatever story we give her. No, not anymore. I wasn't soft. I wasn't naive. I wasn't going to accept their story. Because I had heard their story already, in their own voices, through a door they thought kept me out, and that story was damning. Late at night, when the house was still, I replayed every word in my mind. Locked away. Nothing. The biggest share. Grandma's favorite. Each phrase seared itself into my memory, fueling my resolve. I realized then that I couldn't just sit and wait. I needed to see the papers for myself. I needed to hold them in my hands, read Grandma's words with my own eyes, and confirm what my heart already knew. The next step was clear. I had to get into that office. I didn't know how yet, but one thing was certain. My family had hidden my inheritance papers, but they had forgotten one crucial detail. I wasn't just Grandma's favorite, I was the one who wrote those papers in the first place. Once I knew the truth that my family had hidden my grandmother's will, I couldn't rest. I lay awake night after night, replaying their words, the sneers in my siblings' voices, the cold certainty in my father's tone. They believed I would stay quiet forever. They believed the documents were locked away beyond my reach. But they had forgotten something important. I wasn't just the granddaughter mentioned in those papers. I was the one who wrote them. It happened 2 years before Grandma passed. She'd asked me to help her draft her will because, unlike my siblings, I had studied paralegal coursework during college. I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew enough about formatting, language, and legal clarity to help her prepare documents before she took them to her attorney for finalization. I still remembered sitting at her dining table with my laptop open, typing as she spoke. "Not too flowery," she had said, tapping her finger on the table. "Just clear and fair. I want them to know exactly what I want." And what she wanted was this. The largest portion of her estate, including her house, her savings, and her heirlooms, would go to me. My parents and siblings would receive portions, but smaller ones. "Because they'll be fine without me," she had said with a smile. "But you, Elise, you need a foundation. You're the one I trust to carry this forward." I remembered the warmth in my chest as I typed those words, the mixture of pride and responsibility. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I was just helping her. But now, that memory was everything. Those papers existed. They had her signature, her instructions, my fingerprints all over them, and my family had buried them, convinced I'd never know. I had to find them. The first time I tried to break into my father's office, I felt like a criminal in my own home. I waited until everyone was asleep, creeping down the hallway with my heart hammering so loudly I was sure it would wake them. The doorknob was cold in my hand, but when I twisted it didn't move. Locked. I crouched down, trying to see if I could jimmy it open with a hairpin. My hands shook so badly the pin slipped from my fingers twice. After a few minutes of fumbling, I gave up, sweat dripping down my temples. The fear of being caught overwhelmed me. But the idea wouldn't leave my mind. The papers were in there. I knew it. So I watched. I waited. I studied my father's routine. One afternoon, when he left for a meeting, I saw him grab his keys from the hook by the door. A ring of keys jingled in his hand, but one small brass key caught my eye. The office key. He always took it with him, which meant, if I wanted access, I'd need to catch him off guard. The opportunity came a week later. My parents had gone to dinner, leaving my siblings and me at home. Harper was locked in her room on the phone, Daniel sprawled on the couch watching TV. I pretended to grab my coat, telling Daniel I was running to the store. He grunted in reply, not even looking up. I slipped out the front door, looped around the house, and crept back inside through the side entrance where my father often left his briefcase. And there it was, his jacket draped over the chair, keys dangling from the pocket. My hands shook as I pulled the brass key free. My pulse thundered in my ears as I tiptoed to the office door, glancing over my shoulder to make sure no one had followed. The key slid in easily. A click, a turn, and the lock released. The office smelled like old paper and whiskey. I shut the door softly behind me, the sound of the TV muffled in the distance. My eyes darted to the desk. The drawers locked. I tried the same brass key. Another click. Inside the bottom drawer, beneath stacks of old bills and tax folders, I saw it. A large envelope with my grandmother's handwriting on the front. My knees nearly buckled. I pulled it out with trembling hands. The flap was sealed, but the adhesive had grown weak with time. I slid my finger under it and opened it carefully. The papers inside were crisp, official, and instantly familiar, because they were mine, not in ownership, but in creation. I recognized the font, the formatting, even the way I had indented paragraphs. These were the drafts I had typed on my laptop at Grandma's table, every word transcribed from her instructions. And at the bottom, in steady cursive, was her signature. Margaret Louise Stanton. Tears blurred my vision as I held the pages. Grandma had trusted me to put her wishes into words. And here they were hidden, stolen, buried by the very people who should have honored her most. The will was clear. I was the primary beneficiary. The house, her savings, her jewelry, her personal heirlooms, all entrusted to me. My parents and siblings were included, but their shares were modest compared to mine. No wonder they had hidden it. I pressed the papers to my chest, a flood of emotions overwhelming me: grief, betrayal, anger, vindication. My family had looked me in the eyes, called me naive, dismissed me as soft, all while sitting on proof that Grandma had chosen me above them. They thought I wouldn't know, they thought they could erase me. But they had forgotten that I had written these very words. I quickly snapped photos of every page with my phone, my fingers fumbling with the buttons. Then I slid the papers back into the envelope, tucked it neatly into the drawer, and locked everything behind me just as I had found it. When I returned the key to my father's jacket, my hands were still trembling. I left the office, closed the door, and walked calmly into the kitchen. Daniel barely glanced at me, absorbed in his show. Harper's muffled voice still carried from her room. No one knew what I had just done. No one knew I had the proof. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling with a strange mix of triumph and sorrow. I finally had confirmation. My suspicions were right. My family had buried my inheritance papers, but they didn't know I had them now digitally, safely stored. And soon, their betrayal would come to light. They had hidden my inheritance papers, forgetting I was the one who wrote them. I don't think there are words strong enough to describe what it feels like to realize your own family has betrayed you. Lovers can leave, friends can drift, co-workers can backstab, but family? Sacred. It's supposed to be the one constant in a world full of chaos. Yet, as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling with my grandmother's will saved on my phone, all I could feel was a hollow ache. My family hadn't just betrayed me, they had conspired against me. They had looked me in the eye, lied to my face, and laughed about how I'd never fight back. And for what? Money. Property. A house that still smelled faintly of Grandma's lavender perfume. It was more than greed. It was a deliberate choice to erase me. Every memory of the past few weeks hit me differently now. My father's sharp tone when I asked about the estate. My mother's forced smile when she told me not to worry. Daniel's smirk. Harper's dismissive laugh. At the time, those moments stung. Now, they burned. They had always seen me as the weakest link, the soft one, the naive child who wouldn't push back. And they used that image of me as the foundation for their betrayal. The irony was, Grandma had seen me differently. She trusted me with her words, her wishes, her legacy. She knew I was capable of more than my family believed. And now, by hiding those papers, my family had dishonored not just me, but her. That realization broke me in a way nothing else could. Because this wasn't just about money. It was about love. I thought of all the times Grandma had stood by me when my parents didn't. How she drove me to school plays when my father was too busy. How she attended my college graduation when my siblings skipped it. How she reminded me that I was strong when everyone else dismissed me. She had been my anchor, my safe place, my home. And now, her final wishes, her last gift to me, had been twisted, hidden, locked away by the very people who should have protected them. I cried that night. Harder than I had since the funeral. The kind of sobs that leave your chest raw, your throat aching, your pillow soaked. I cried for Grandma. I cried for myself. And I cried for the family I thought I had, the one I realized never truly existed. When the tears finally stopped, anger rushed in to fill the emptiness. I sat up in bed, wiping my swollen eyes, and whispered into the darkness. No more. If they thought I was soft, I would show them steel. If they thought I was naive, I would prove them wrong. If they thought they could silence me, I would let the truth scream louder than their lies. From that moment, my heartbreak transformed into determination. I started making a list in my journal, every suspicious thing I'd seen, every conversation I'd overheard, every piece of evidence I could use. I wrote down the dates, the details, the exact words that had sliced me open. I didn't want to forget anything. Then I added a new section, proof, the photos of Grandma's will on my phone. The digital files still saved on my old laptop from the day I drafted the document. My memories of sitting at the dining table with Grandma, listening to her dictate every word. I realized I had more than suspicion. I had power. But power alone wasn't enough. I needed a plan. That's when I thought of my grandmother's lawyer, Mr. Franklin. I remembered his kind face from years ago, when I'd tagged along with Grandma to his office. She had trusted him deeply. If anyone could help me, it would be him. Still, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to march into the living room, slam the papers down on the table, and watch their faces crumble. But what would that accomplish? They'd deny it, twist it, maybe even destroy the originals before I could prove anything. No, I couldn't confront them yet. Not until I had backup. Not until I had someone who could fight beside me. In the meantime, I had to act normal. That was the hardest part, pretending. Smiling at Harper when she mocked me, nodding along when Daniel teased me, hugging my mother when she pretended to comfort me, sitting at the dinner table, pretending we were still a family, when, in reality, they had cut me out long ago. Inside, every laugh, every word, every glance made my skin crawl. I wanted to scream, "I know what you did," but I swallowed it down, hiding my fury behind a mask of composure. If Grandma had trusted me with her legacy, I owed it to her to be smart. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this betrayal wasn't just financial, it was emotional warfare. My parents and siblings hadn't just stolen from me. They had tried to convince me I was unworthy of what was already mine. They had tried to break my spirit before I even knew the truth. But in their arrogance, they made one fatal mistake. They forgot who wrote those papers. Every line, every clause, every phrase bore my touch. I knew the language, the layout, the order of Grandma's wishes. Even without the original envelope, I could reconstruct it. They thought they could bury me under silence, but I had a voice, and soon the law would hear it. That night, as I stared at the photos on my phone, I felt something shift inside me. Grief still lingered, yes. Pain still stabbed at me. But beneath it all was something new, fire. I whispered again into the darkness, not to my family this time, but to Grandma. I won't let them erase you. Or me. The next morning, I woke with red eyes but a steady heart. My siblings smirked, my parents avoided me, but I didn't flinch. I carried myself differently, a quiet strength growing inside me. They didn't notice at first, but they would. Because I wasn't just going to take back what was mine. I was going to make them face the weight of what they'd done. I vowed not just to reclaim what was mine, but to make them face consequences. If betrayal is poison, then pretending everything is fine is the glass of wine you mix it in. That's exactly what my family tried to serve me the night of the so-called family dinner. It was my mother's idea. She announced it one morning as casually as if she were inviting us for a barbecue. "We should all have a proper dinner together," she said, setting her coffee cup down. "To talk things over. To make sure everyone's on the same page." My stomach tightened. I knew what things meant. The inheritance, the papers, the will they had hidden. Harper's eyes flicked to Daniel, and the corners of his mouth twitched. My father grunted his approval, though his jaw tightened slightly, as if he knew I'd catch the subtext. I agreed without hesitation, even managing a smile. That sounds nice. But inside, I was already sharpening my blade. The night of the dinner, the table was set with Grandma's old china, the irony so sharp it nearly cut me. My mother bustled around with roast chicken and potatoes, her voice a little too cheerful. My father poured himself whiskey. Harper and Daniel exchanged glances across the table like conspirators. I sat down quietly, letting the tension wash over me. For the first 20 minutes, conversation was forced and shallow. Harper talked about her job. Daniel bragged about a project at work. My mother kept asking if everyone had enough to eat. It was almost laughable, the performance of a happy family meal while the truth sat like a corpse in the room. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "We should address the matter of your grandmother's estate." The air stilled. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. This was it. He set his glass down and leaned forward, his tones smooth but firm. "Margaret didn't leave much behind. A few things here and there, but nothing worth fighting over. Your mother and I have been sorting through it, and we'll make sure everything is distributed fairly." Fairly. The word curdled in my stomach. Harper chimed in quickly, her voice syrupy. "Yes, Elise. Don't stress yourself. Grandma wouldn't want us bickering about money. It's better if we just let Mom and Dad handle things." Daniel smirked, adding, "Exactly. We're family. We can trust each other." I looked at each of them slowly, letting silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. My mother shifted in her seat. My father's eyes narrowed. Then I set my fork down and said softly, "What about the documents in Dad's office?" The reaction was immediate. My father froze, his knuckles whitening around his glass. Harper's head jerked up, her eyes wide. Daniel stopped mid-smirk, his expression collapsing into something sharp and suspicious. The room was silent, except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, my father forced a laugh. "What documents?" "You're imagining things." I tilted my head, keeping my expression calm. "Am I?" "Because I could swear I saw an envelope with Grandma's handwriting on it, locked in your desk." Harper's face drained of color. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. My mother's lips pressed together in a thin, bloodless line. My heart pounded in my chest, but I didn't let it show. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. It's strange, isn't it? All this secrecy, the hushed conversations, the way no one will give me a straight answer. Almost as if there's something you don't want me to see. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. "You don't know what you're talking about." I met his glare evenly. "Don't I?" My father tried to regain control, his voice sharp. "Elise, enough. You're letting your grief cloud your judgment. There's nothing hidden, nothing of importance." I let a small smile play on my lips, though my insides churned. "Funny. Because I think Grandma would disagree." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. They knew. They knew I knew. And though I hadn't revealed everything, hadn't mentioned the photos on my phone, or the digital files saved on my computer, they could see it in my eyes. The balance had shifted. For the first time, they weren't the ones holding all the power. My mother's hands trembled as she refilled her wineglass. Harper fidgeted with her napkin. Daniel glared at me like he wanted to leap across the table. My father's face was stone, but the muscle in his jaw ticked with barely contained anger. I picked up my fork again, calmly spearing a potato. "Dinner's delicious, Mom. Thank you." No one said a word after that. The rest of the meal was a silent war. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, while they shifted in their seats, the tension thick enough to choke on. When the plates were cleared, I excused myself politely and went upstairs. My hands shook as I closed my bedroom door, my breath coming fast. The confrontation had drained me, but it had also electrified me. For weeks, I had been suffocated by their silence, crushed by their deception. But tonight, I had cracked their armor. I had watched the color drain from their faces, seen the fear in their eyes. They knew the game was changing. Of course, I wasn't foolish enough to think this would scare them into surrender. If anything, they would grow more desperate, more dangerous. But now, they knew I wasn't the naive little sister, the soft daughter, the clueless granddaughter they thought I was. I had hinted at the truth, just enough to rattle them. But the real battle wasn't going to be fought at the dinner table, it was going to be fought in the courtroom. And this time, I wouldn't be alone, because tomorrow, I was going to see Mr. Franklin. I had let them taste fear at dinner, but I wanted the law to deliver their punishment. The morning after that disastrous dinner, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. My hands still shook when I remembered my father's glare, Daniel's slam of his fist on the table, Harper's wide eyes, but instead of fear, the trembling came from adrenaline. I had rattled them, and that meant I had leverage. But rattling them wasn't enough. I couldn't win this war with clever remarks or tense family dinners. If I wanted justice, I needed someone who could stand in my corner with more than words. I needed the law. That's when I thought of him. Mr. Franklin. He had been my grandmother's attorney for years. I still remembered going with her to his office when I was younger. She'd ask me to sit quietly in the corner with a book while she discussed grown-up business. But afterward, she'd wink and buy me ice cream, whispering, "Someday you'll understand all this. Someday it will matter." And now, it mattered more than ever. I dug through my phone for his number, half afraid it wouldn't still be in my contacts. But there it was, Franklin and Associates. My fingers hovered nervously over the call button before I finally pressed it. His secretary answered, and after I explained who I was, she put me on hold. A few moments later, that warm, steady voice came through the line. "Elise? My goodness, I haven't heard from you since you were in college. How are you, dear?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Not great, Mr. Franklin. I think my family is hiding my grandmother's will from me." There was a pause on the other end, then his voice dropped, serious now. "Come into my office, today if you can." I agreed immediately. Walking into Franklin and Associates felt like stepping into another world. The office was quiet, lined with shelves of thick law books and framed certificates. The receptionist smiled kindly at me and led me to his office. When I stepped inside, Mr. Franklin rose from behind his desk. He was older now, with more gray in his hair, but his eyes were sharp and kind. He extended his hand, and when I shook it, I felt some of the weight on my chest ease. "Sit, Elise," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the silence in my family, the hushed conversations, the locked drawers, the late-night whispers. I described overhearing them talk about hiding the papers. I told him about sneaking into my father's office, finding the envelope, recognizing my own work in the will, and photographing every page. Through it all, Mr. Franklin listened intently. His hands folded, his gaze steady. He didn't interrupt, didn't dismiss me, didn't doubt a single word. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "Elise, I believe you." Those 3 words nearly undid me. I hadn't realized how badly I needed someone to say them until I heard them out loud. My throat tightened, tears stinging my eyes, but I blinked them back. "Your grandmother trusted me with her wishes," he continued. "I can tell you this. She was very clear about leaving you the majority of her estate. She said you were the one she trusted most. If your parents and siblings are hiding the will, they are not only betraying you, they are betraying her." Hearing it confirmed by him sent a shiver down my spine. He leaned forward, his voice firm. "Do you have the photos with you?" I nodded, pulling out my phone. My hands shook slightly as I handed it to him, scrolling to the images. He adjusted his glasses and studied each page carefully, nodding as he went. "These are authentic," he said at last. "I remember this document. Margaret asked me to review it after you drafted it. This is the final version we filed." What you found was one of her signed copies. Relief and anger swirled inside me. Relief that I wasn't imagining things. Anger that my family had hidden something even Mr. Franklin had validated. "What do?" I whispered. He clasped his hands together. First, we'll file a petition with the probate court. We'll request that the will be formally recognized and entered into record. If your family tries to contest it, they'll have to present their case before a judge. And given the evidence you've shown me, Elise, I assure you they don't have a case. My chest swelled with a mix of fear and hope. Court. The word felt heavy, terrifying, final. But it also felt like the only way forward. Mr. Franklin must have seen the conflict on my face, because his expression softened. You've been through so much already. But Elise, this is winnable. You have the truth. You have evidence. And you have me. We'll fight this together. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't alone. I left his office with a stack of papers to sign and a strange sense of calm settling over me. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But now I had someone on my side who knew the law. Someone who could give me the tools to fight back. That night, as I sat at my desk going over the documents Mr. Franklin had given me, I thought about my grandmother. I imagined her smile. The way her eyes sparkled when she talked about the future she wanted for me. And I knew she would be proud. Because I wasn't shrinking anymore. I wasn't letting them silence me. When I closed my eyes, I could still hear Harper's mocking voice calling me soft. Daniel's smug tone calling me clueless. But now, those words didn't break me. They fueled me. I whispered into the quiet of my room. You thought I'd never fight, but you were wrong. The betrayal of blood was deep, but I wasn't powerless anymore. With Mr. Franklin beside me, I finally had the strength and the proof to take my family to court. The day of the first court hearing felt unreal. For weeks, I had carried the secret weight of betrayal inside me, knowing, but not confronting, watching my family pretend everything was fine. Now there was no more pretending. No more whispering behind closed doors. No more silence. When I stepped into the courthouse, the air was thick with tension and the faint smell of polished wood. My palms were damp, my knees trembling, but I forced myself to walk tall. My grandmother had trusted me. Mr. Franklin believed in me. I had to believe in myself too. And then I saw them. My family sat across the aisle, clustered together, like a fortress. My father's face was stern, unreadable. My mother clutched her purse tightly, her knuckles pale. Harper looked restless, fidgeting with her phone, while Daniel leaned back in his chair with that same smug smirk I had grown to hate. Their eyes found me as I walked in. But none of them smiled. None of them spoke. It was as if I were a stranger, an intruder in their carefully constructed world. Mr. Franklin touched my shoulder gently. Deep breath, Elise. Remember, you have the truth. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. When the judge entered, the courtroom hushed. We all stood, then sat again as the proceedings began. My father's lawyer, a sharp-looking man in a gray suit, was the first to speak. Your Honor, he began smoothly. This is a case of misunderstanding. My clients maintain that Margaret Stanton did not leave behind a valid will. The documents presented by Miss Rivers, he glanced at me with a flicker of disdain, are either outdated drafts or incomplete copies. The estate should be divided equally among the family, as per state intestacy laws. My blood boiled. Outdated drafts? Incomplete copies? He was dismissing my grandmother's words, my work, my memories, as if they were nothing. But Mr. Franklin was calm. When it was his turn, he stood with steady authority. Your Honor, what Miss Rivers has presented is not an outdated draft. It is the final signed version of Margaret Stanton's will. I reviewed this document personally 2 years ago, after Miss Rivers drafted it under Margaret's direction. It reflects Margaret's clear intentions that were deliberately concealed by her family. He held up the copies I had given him, presenting them to the court. My heart pounded as the judge examined them, her brow furrowing slightly. Then came the moment I dreaded. The crossfire. The lawyer called Harper to the stand. My sister's heels clicked sharply against the floor as she walked up, her head held high. She swore her oath, then settled into the witness chair, glancing at me with thinly veiled contempt. Miss Stanton, the lawyer began, did your grandmother ever tell you she intended to leave the majority of her estate to Elise? Harper's voice was firm. No, She always said everything would be divided equally. That was fair. Grandma believed in fairness. I clenched my fists under the table. Liar. The lawyer continued. So, when Elise claims otherwise, how does that make you feel? Harper gave a little laugh. It makes me feel like she's desperate. Like she's inventing a story because she doesn't want to share. It's selfish. The words stung, but I forced myself to stay composed. Franklin squeezed my arm, silently reminding me, patience. When it was his turn, Franklin approached the stand slowly. Miss Stanton, he said, his voice calm. Are you aware that Elise helped draft your grandmother's will 2 years ago? Harper blinked, clearly caught off guard. No, I wasn't aware. So if Elise recognized the document because she typed it herself, wouldn't that give her credibility? Harper shifted in her seat, fumbling for words. I don't know. Maybe. But I still think Grandma wouldn't do that. Franklin's gaze sharpened. Is it possible you simply didn't know the full extent of your grandmother's wishes? For a moment, Harper faltered. Her lips pressed together, her eyes flickered downward. Then she recovered with a defensive shrug. I guess it's possible. But it doesn't sound like her. Franklin didn't press further, but I could see the doubt creeping into the room. Next came Daniel. He strutted to the stand, radiating confidence. His testimony mirrored Harper's equal division, fairness, disbelief that Grandma would favor me. But when Franklin questioned him, Daniel's cockiness betrayed him. Mr. Stanton, Franklin asked, isn't it true that you told your sister Elise she was too soft to ever fight you on this matter? Daniel stiffened, his jaw tightening. I never said that. Franklin raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Because Elise recalls overhearing you say exactly that. And given the locked drawer in your father's office, one might infer there was something worth hiding. Daniel's face flushed red. He looked toward our father, then back at Franklin, his composure cracking. That was the moment I realized truth had a way of seeping through cracks, no matter how thick the walls. When it was my turn to take the stand, my legs felt like lead. I walked slowly, forcing myself to meet the judge's gaze. After swearing in, I sat down, my hands trembling in my lap. Franklin's questions were gentle. Elise, can you tell us about the day you helped your grandmother draft her will? I nodded, my voice shaky at first. She sat at her dining table. I brought my laptop. She told me exactly what she wanted. That she wanted me to have the house, her savings, her jewelry. She said my parents and siblings would be fine without her help, but she wanted me to have a foundation. She trusted me to carry her wishes. Franklin smiled encouragingly. And did you recognize the document when you found it? Yes, I typed every word. I formatted it. I even remember the way she insisted on the phrase, to honor our memories together. That was her exact wording. It's in the will. The judge looked down at the papers again, clearly finding the phrase. Franklin nodded. Thank you, Elise. No further questions. The opposing lawyer tried to rattle me, pressing about my motives, suggesting I fabricated the story for financial gain, but I didn't flinch. For every question, I answered with calm certainty. I didn't need theatrics. I had the truth. When I stepped down from the stand, I felt lighter, as though Grandma herself had been sitting beside me. As the session ended, the judge announced that she would review all evidence and reconvene with her decision. I gathered my things, avoiding my family's glares. For the first time, I didn't feel small under their stares. I felt strong, because I had faced them head-on, and I hadn't crumbled. But the battle wasn't over. The real test would come when the judge spoke her ruling. The night after my first day in court, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the weight of the trial pressing down on me. My family's eyes haunted me, the disdain in Daniel's smirk, the icy anger in my father's glare, the shallow arrogance in Harper's tone as she called me selfish. But beneath all of that, I also remembered the moment on the stand when I had spoken of Grandma, of her words, her wishes, her trust in me. That memory became my anchor. For the first time in weeks, I realized I wasn't just surviving this fight. I was fighting back. When the next court session began, I walked into the courtroom with my chin a little higher, my steps a little firmer. Mr. Franklin gave me a small nod of encouragement. "Today is your chance, Elise," he whispered. "Let your voice carry. Don't hold back." I nodded, taking a deep breath. My hands trembled, but not from fear this time, from the anticipation of finally being heard. The judge called us to order. The air in the room felt heavier than before, thick with tension. My family sat across from me, united in their silence, but I could feel the cracks spreading in their facade. This time, Franklin wasted no time. He asked the judge to allow me to read directly from my grandmother's will, the very document they had tried to erase. The judge agreed. My heart pounded as I walked to the stand again, a copy of the will in my hands. The paper trembled slightly, but my voice, once shaky, grew steadier with each word. "I, Margaret Louise Stanton," I began, "being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this my last will and testament." The courtroom was silent. Every pair of eyes was on me. I continued, my voice gaining strength. "To my granddaughter Elise Rivers, I leave my home, my savings, my heirlooms, and the majority of my estate. Elise has been my greatest source of comfort, and I trust her to honor my memory." I paused, swallowing hard. The words blurred through my tears, but I forced myself to keep going. "She has been by my side when others were not. She has shown me love, care, and loyalty, and I want her to have the foundation she needs to continue forward in life." I glanced up briefly. Harper's face was pale, her jaw clenched. Daniel scowled, arms crossed tightly over his chest. My father stared at the floor, his mask beginning to slip. My mother's eyes glistened, though whether from shame or anger I couldn't tell. I took a steadying breath and read the next lines, my voice stronger now. "To my son and daughter, and to my other grandchildren, I leave smaller but significant portions of my estate, trusting that they will manage well with what I provide. But to Elise I entrust the most, because she has been there when I needed her most." A lump rose in my throat. I remembered that night at Grandma's table, her hand covering mine as she said those words out loud before I typed them. I lowered the paper slightly, my voice breaking but filled with determination. She chose me. Not because I was her favorite, but because she trusted me. She trusted me with her life, her stories, her home. And now she trusts me with her legacy. For my family to hide this, to bury her words, is not just a betrayal of me. "Continue, Miss Rivers." I nodded and finished the will, my voice unwavering. By the time I placed the papers down, tears streamed freely down my face, but I felt no shame. Those tears weren't weakness, they were love. When I stepped down, Franklin met my eyes with pride. "Well done," he whispered. The opposing lawyer tried to shake me afterward. He questioned my motives, suggested I was fabricating my closeness with Grandma. But this time, I didn't falter. "You can say whatever you want," I told him firmly, my voice steady. But I was there. I held her hand. I typed her words. "And I will not let you erase her voice or mine." For once, he had no quick retort. By the time court adjourned, I felt something I hadn't in months. Power. My voice, the one they had tried to silence, had filled that courtroom with the truth. My grandmother's truth. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Microphones shoved toward me, voices shouting questions. "Elise, do you think you'll win? What do you say to your family's claims?" I stopped, took a deep breath, and spoke clearly for all to hear. "My grandmother loved us all, but she chose to trust me with her estate. I will honor her wishes, no matter how many lies I have to fight through. This isn't just about money, it's about respect, about family, about truth." The cameras clicked. The questions continued. But I didn't shrink. I walked past them with my head high, Franklin by my side. That night, back home, I replayed the day over and over in my mind. The fear I'd once carried was fading. I wasn't the quiet, naive girl they thought I was. I was the woman who had found her voice, and I wasn't going to let anyone silence it again. As I sat on my bed, I whispered to myself, almost like a vow, I will not be erased, not by them, not by anyone. Because for so long I had let silence choke me. I had let their lies define me. But now, I had spoken the truth in a room where it mattered most. And that truth was louder than their betrayal. The judge had yet to speak her final ruling, but I knew when she did, my voice would echo in her decision. Courtrooms have a way of magnifying every second, stretching time until it feels like hours. By the day of the final hearing, I thought I'd aged years in the span of a few weeks. My nerves were raw, my body exhausted, but my resolve had never been stronger. This was it. The day everything would be decided. When I stepped inside the courtroom, I felt the weight of eyes on me. My family sat across the aisle, rigid and tense. My father's jaw was tight, his hands folded on the table like a man bracing for a storm. My mother stared straight ahead, refusing to meet my gaze. Harper picked at her nails, her lips pressed into a thin line. Daniel leaned back as if he was still in control, though the twitch in his jaw gave him away. Mr. Franklin sat beside me, calm and steady as always. This is the final stretch, Elise, he whispered. Whatever happens, remember you've already spoken your truth. That's something no ruling can take from you. I nodded, gripping the edge of the table so tightly my knuckles turned white. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and glanced at the stack of papers before her. For a moment, the air felt too thick to breathe. She cleared her throat, her voice firm and deliberate. This court has reviewed the evidence presented by both parties regarding the estate of Margaret Louise Stanton. We have considered the testimony, the documentation, and the arguments in full. I held my breath, my pulse pounding in my ears. The judge continued. It is clear to this court that a valid last will and testament was created by Miss Stanton, with the assistance of her granddaughter, Elise Rivers. This document was reviewed and filed by her attorney, Mr. Franklin, and signed by Miss Stanton in the presence of witnesses. The will expresses her clear intention to leave the majority of her estate to Miss Rivers. A rush of relief surged through me, but I didn't dare move. The judge's tone sharpened. It is also clear that members of the Stanton family deliberately concealed this document in an attempt to override the decedent's wishes and mislead both Elise and this court. The words landed like thunder. Across the aisle, Harper's face went white. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his smirk gone. My father's expression cracked, a flash of anger and humiliation flickering across his features. My mother lowered her head, shame written across her face. The judge straightened, her voice resolute. This court hereby rules that the will is valid and binding. The estate will be distributed according to its instructions. The majority share, including the home, savings, and heirlooms, is awarded to Miss Rivers. The remaining portions shall be distributed as specified in the will. My chest tightened, tears burning my eyes. Grandma's voice echoed in my memory. I want you to have the things that will help you build a life, not just the things that gather dust. The judge wasn't finished. In addition, due to the deliberate concealment of this will by the Stanton family, this court orders that all legal costs incurred by Miss Rivers shall be paid by the defendants. The gavel struck with a sharp crack that echoed through the room. Court is adjourned. For a moment, I sat frozen, unable to process it. I had won. Against all odds, I had reclaimed what my grandmother had left me. The truth had prevailed. Mr. Franklin placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. It's done, Elise. You did it. The tears spilled then, hot and unrelenting, but they weren't tears of despair this time. They were tears of release, of victory, of vindication. Across the aisle, my family gathered their things in silence. Harper's face was twisted with anger. Daniel muttered curses under his breath. My father stormed toward the exit without a word. And my mother followed, shoulders slumped. None of them looked at me. And I realized they couldn't, because looking at me would mean acknowledging what they had done, what they had tried to steal, and how, completely, they had failed. As I stood and walked out of the courtroom, Reporters swarmed again. Cameras flashed. Microphones shoved toward me. Elise, how do you feel about the verdict? Do you have anything to say to your family? I paused, wiping my tears, and found my voice. My grandmother's wishes were honored today. That's all I wanted. This was never about greed, it was about love, respect, and truth. And I hope anyone watching remembers this. Silence and lies might last for a while, but the truth will always find its way to light. The cameras clicked, the crowd murmured, but I walked past them with my head high. Outside the courthouse, the sun felt warmer than it had in months. The weight that had crushed me was gone, lifted by the sound of the gavel declaring justice. I looked up at the sky, imagining Grandma watching over me, her kind eyes crinkling with pride. I whispered softly, "I did it, Grandma. I kept your promise alive." For the first time in what felt like forever, I truly believed it. The fight was over, the truth was mine. But as the silence settled after the ruling, I realized the hardest part wasn't winning in court, it was learning to live with the family who had chosen betrayal over love. Victory doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it feels like silence, an echoing quiet where noise used to be, an emptiness where bonds once existed. That's what the days after the verdict were like for me. The gavel had come down. The judge's words had validated everything I'd fought for. My grandmother's wishes were honored, and my family was ordered to cover the legal costs. On paper, it was the perfect victory. But when I went home that evening, the silence in the house was deafening. No shouting, no laughter, no conversation, just nothing. My father avoided me completely. He spent most of his time shut in his office, though now I knew he had nothing left to hide there. My mother moved around the house, quietly, her footsteps soft, her eyes downcast whenever they met mine. Harper retreated into her room, slamming the door if I came too close. Daniel stopped mocking me, but his silence carried more contempt than words ever could. It was strange, after months of their secrecy. I thought silence would feel like peace. But instead, it was suffocating. One morning, I walked into the kitchen to find my mother making coffee. She glanced up at me, her face pale, then quickly looked down. I tried to bridge the gap. "Mom," I said softly, "you could have told me the truth. You all could have." Her hands shook slightly as she stirred her cup. "You wouldn't understand," she whispered. I clenched my fists. "Grandma trusted me, she chose me, and you tried to erase that." For the first time, she met my eyes. There was guilt there, swimming beneath the surface, but also stubbornness. "We thought it was unfair. You've always been her favorite. We just wanted balance." "Balance?" I repeated bitterly. "By stealing from me? By lying to my face? By hiding her words in a locked drawer?" She flinched, but she didn't answer. She turned away, taking her coffee with her. That was the last real conversation we had. Over the next few weeks, the silence in the house became unbearable. Meals were eaten separately. Rooms that once held family chatter now felt like tombs. Even my father, once so domineering, barely spoke. The weight of the judge's condemnation had silenced him more effectively than I ever could have. I mourned the family dinners, the shared laughter, the illusion of unity we'd once had. But slowly, painfully, I realized that what I was mourning wasn't real. It had never been real. My family had always chosen convenience over honesty, appearances over truth. Grandma had been the glue, and once she was gone, the cracks split wide open. One Sunday, I drove to her house, now my house. The keys felt heavy in my hand as I unlocked the door for the first time since the ruling. The moment I stepped inside, the scent of lavender and old books hit me, and I collapsed into tears. But they weren't tears of grief alone. They were tears of release. Her home was mine now. Not stolen, not hidden, not silenced. Mine. I wandered through each room, running my fingers along the furniture she'd polished so carefully, the picture frames filled with family smiles that now felt like lies. I paused in her bedroom, sitting on the edge of her neatly made bed, and whispered, "It's safe now, Grandma. I promise I'll take care of it." The silence in her house was different from the silence in mine. It wasn't heavy with betrayal. It was gentle, peaceful, healing. Still, the weight of my broken family lingered. Friends reached out, asking how I was holding up. "You won," they said. "You must feel amazing." And I did, part of me did. But another part of me felt hollow, because winning had cost me something I could never replace: the illusion of family. Therapy helped. Dr. Collins, the therapist I'd begun seeing during the case, reminded me that grief has many layers. "You're not just grieving your grandmother," she said gently. "You're grieving the family you thought you had." Her words hit hard. She was right. I had clung to the idea that my parents, my siblings, loved me unconditionally. But their actions proved otherwise. They chose money over me, lies over love, silence over honesty. And that realization was its own kind of death. But as the weeks passed, I began to see the silence differently. It wasn't just absence, it was space. Space to heal. Space to grow. Space to choose who I wanted to become without their constant shadow. I stopped eating meals in the house I'd once shared with them and started spending more time at Grandma's. Slowly, I brought over my things. A suitcase at first, then boxes. Eventually, the silence in my parents' house, no longer mattered. I didn't belong there anymore. One evening, as I unpacked books onto Grandma's old shelves, I realized something. The silence I once feared was becoming my sanctuary. It wasn't the suffocating silence of betrayal. It was the silence of freedom. No more whispers behind closed doors. No more locked drawers. No more cruel smirks. Just me, my memories, and the woman who had loved me enough to leave me her legacy. The final fracture came when Harper texted me out of the blue weeks later. "You think you won, but you lost us." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "I didn't lose you, Harper. You lost me." I never heard from her again. That was when I understood fully. Silence wasn't my enemy anymore. Silence was the distance I needed. In the months that followed, my parents and siblings drifted further and further from me. Family dinners stopped. Holiday gatherings vanished. The phone calls ceased. The storm they had created left behind nothing but quiet. And yet, I survived it. I learned to sit in that quiet without fear. I learned to fill it with my own voice, my own choices, my own life. Because in the end, the silence after the storm wasn't punishment, it was protection. And in that silence, I finally began to hear myself again. Moving into Grandma's house wasn't just a change of address, it was a transformation. For the first time in my life, I was living entirely on my own terms. No more second-guessing myself. No more waiting for someone else's approval. No more silences that weren't mine to control. At first, though, the house felt too big, too quiet. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the refrigerator made me acutely aware of the emptiness. I caught myself expecting Grandma to shuffle around the corner with a smile and a cup of tea, or to call my name from the garden. But slowly, the quiet began to shift. It became less of an emptiness and more of a canvas. This house wasn't just a reminder of a loss, it was a foundation she had chosen for me. I started small. Fresh paint in the living room, a color that made me feel light and energized. New curtains that let the morning sun pour in. I filled the kitchen with the scent of my own cooking. Learning Grandma's recipes but also experimenting with my own. Each change felt like a declaration. This is mine now. I belong here. The inheritance wasn't just about the house, though. It gave me choices I'd never had before. I used part of it to pay off my lingering student loans, something that had weighed on me for years. For the first time since graduating, I felt free from that invisible chain. I also set aside a portion to invest. Mr. Franklin had connected me with a financial advisor who helped me create a plan. I didn't want to squander Grandma's gift. I wanted it to grow, to carry me forward, to honor the trust she had placed in me. But the most important investment I made wasn't financial, it was emotional. I began therapy in earnest, no longer just to survive the trial but to truly heal. Dr. Collins guided me through the tangled emotions, the grief, the anger, the guilt of cutting ties with my family. She helped me understand that boundaries weren't cruelty, they were protection. One day, she asked me, "Elise, what does living on your own terms mean to you now?" I thought for a moment before answering. It means not letting other people decide who I am. It means choosing my life, not waiting for someone else to hand it to me. It means freedom. She smiled. "And do you believe you deserve that freedom?" I took a deep breath. Yes, I do. That was the first time I said it without hesitation. Work took on new meaning too. For so long, I had held myself back, always trying not to rock the boat, not to draw too much attention. But now, I found my confidence. I pitched bold ideas in meetings. I volunteered for projects. My colleagues began to notice, and for the first time, I wasn't shrinking from recognition. I wasn't just surviving my job anymore, I was thriving in it. Friendships became deeper as well. Vanessa, my closest friend, had stood by me through the entire ordeal. She came over often, filling the house with laughter and warmth. Together, we planted flowers in Grandma's garden, sat on the porch with glasses of wine, and talked about everything and nothing. One evening, she looked around the freshly painted living room and said, "You've made this place your own. You look happier than I've ever seen you." And I realized she was right. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't defined by what my family thought of me. I wasn't the soft one, the naive one, the clueless one. I was Elise, the woman who had fought for herself, who had spoken her truth, who had stood her ground in a courtroom and won. That realization gave me courage to do something I never thought I would. Travel. Grandma had always dreamed of visiting Italy, but she never had the chance. With a portion of the inheritance, I booked a trip. Standing in Rome, looking up at the ancient ruins, I felt closer to her than ever. I whispered, "This is for you, Grandma. And for me, too." That trip wasn't just a vacation, it was a promise to myself. A promise that I would live boldly, not shrink away. That I would use what she left me not just to survive, but to experience the world. When I came back, I filled my journal with reflections. I wrote about the fear I'd overcome, the pain I'd endured, the silence I'd reclaimed. But more than that, I wrote about the future, about the life I wanted to build. Living on my own terms didn't mean I was alone. It meant I got to choose who was in my life. Vanessa was there. A few trusted colleagues became close friends. Even Aunt June, who had dropped hints during the worst of it, began visiting more often. She cried when she stepped into Grandma's house, hugging me tightly. "She would be so proud of you, Elise," she whispered. I held her hand and believed her. The silence of betrayal was gone. In its place was the silence of peace. The silence of mornings spent sipping coffee by the window. The silence of nights curled up with a book. The silence of knowing I didn't need anyone else's approval to feel whole. And within that silence, there was also space for laughter, for love, for new beginnings. I had learned that standing on my own terms didn't mean shutting the world out. It meant opening myself up to the right people, the right opportunities, the right future. My family's betrayal had tried to break me. Their silence had tried to erase me. But instead, it gave me the chance to rebuild from the ground up, on my own terms. And for the first time in my life, those terms were more than enough. Pain has a way of either destroying you or reshaping you. For a long time, I thought mine would destroy me, the betrayal, the trial, the silence that followed. But once the dust settled and I began standing on my own terms, I realized something extraordinary. Pain doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning. And for me, that beginning started with telling the truth out loud. At first, it was just conversations with friends. Over coffee, I'd tell Vanessa about what I'd been through. I expected pity, but instead, I saw admiration in her eyes. "Elise," she told me one night, "you don't realize how strong you are. Most people would have folded. You fought." Her words stayed with me. One day at work, during a lunch break, a colleague mentioned her struggles with a family dispute over her late father's belongings. I hesitated at first, then shared my own story. When I finished, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I thought I was alone. Hearing you, it gives me hope." That was the moment I realized. My story wasn't just mine. It could be a light for others lost in the dark of betrayal. I began journaling more deliberately, not just about what I felt, but about what I had learned. I wrote about recognizing manipulation, about trusting your instincts, about standing your ground even when it feels impossible. I wrote about the strength it takes to fight for yourself when even family turns against you. Vanessa read one entry and said, "You should share this, Elise. People need to hear it." The idea terrified me. Sharing publicly meant vulnerability. It meant risking judgment, exposing wounds I'd fought hard to heal. But it also meant reclaiming power in the most complete way by refusing to hide. So I started small. A blog. Just a few posts at first. I titled it "The Voice They Tried to Silence." I wrote anonymously at the beginning, easing into it. But the words poured out of me like water bursting through a dam. I wrote about the courtroom. About the fear of standing alone. To my surprise, people began responding. Comments trickled in. "Thank you for sharing this. I've been through something similar. Your strength inspires me." Strangers, people I'd never met, were finding courage in my words. That realization was life-changing. One night, I stared at the screen, reading those comments over and over, tears streaming down my face. My family had tried to bury me in silence. But here I was, speaking louder than ever, and people were listening. I decided then to attach my real name to the blog. No more hiding. This was my story. And I was proud of it. Soon after, I was invited to speak at a local support group for people dealing with family disputes and inheritance conflicts. Standing in that small community center, my hands trembled as I took the microphone. But when I began to speak, the trembling stopped. "My name is Elise," I said. "And my family tried to six places, erase me, but they couldn't." As I told my story, I saw nods, tears, gasps of recognition. When I finished, people lined up to hug me, to thank me, to tell me their own stories. For the first time, I understood the full power of turning pain into purpose. What my family meant for harm was becoming a source of healing, not just for me, but for others too. I didn't stop there. The blog grew. Invitations came for podcasts, articles, small conferences. Every time I shared, I felt lighter, stronger, more alive. One afternoon, after speaking at a women's empowerment panel, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous, clutching a notebook. "Elise," she whispered, "I'm going through something so similar. My brothers are trying to cut me out of my mom's estate. I was about to give up, but then I read your story. And now, I think I can fight." Her words broke me open. Because in her, I saw myself, the girl who once thought she was too soft, too naive, too weak. And now, here I was, being the proof that she wasn't. I could almost hear her voice in my ear. "See, Elise, you're stronger than you know." My family's betrayal had once felt like the worst thing that could happen to me. But standing there, listening to people tell me how my survival gave them courage, I realized it had become something else. It was fuel. It was fire. It was power. Power I never would have found if they hadn't tried to take everything from me. In therapy, I once told Dr. Collins, "I wish it hadn't happened. I wish Grandma's wishes had been honored without a fight." She nodded gently. "Of course. That pain was real. But Elise, would you be who you are now if it hadn't?" I thought about that for a long time. No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't have found my voice. I wouldn't have discovered my strength. I wouldn't have connected with people who needed hope. It didn't excuse what my family had done, but it did mean that I had taken their betrayal and transformed it into something they could never steal: my power. The house, the inheritance, the money, those were gifts. But the greatest gift my grandmother gave me wasn't written in her will. It was the belief she had in me. And by surviving, by fighting, by speaking, I was finally living up to that belief. Now, when I sit in Grandma's house, the home she entrusted to me, I don't feel just grief. I feel gratitude. Gratitude that she saw me clearly when no one else did. Gratitude that I turned her faith into action. Gratitude that I rose, even when everything tried to drag me down. My pain had become my power. And I knew the final step of this journey was learning to carry that power into the future, with or without the family who once betrayed me.